What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here, and welcome back to a new album review. Today I'm going to be talking about the brand new studio album from Swedish alternative melodic death metal band In Flames, entitled Foregone. Now, this is the band's 14th studio album, and this is the follow-up to I The Mask back in 2019. This is an album that was released through Nuclear Blast Records, and this is the first to credit Tano Wayne on the drums and new full-time permanent member guitarist for this band, former Megadeth and Nevermore guitarist Chris Broderick. Now, for those of you who know me from my reviews from the 2010s, I actually haven't been talking about In Flames so much, but when I listened to In Flames, I thought that they had been one of my favorite bands within the genre, especially in their classic records heyday from the 90s to, I would say, the early 2000s, because I have been a big fan on the earlier releases from albums like Lunar Strain, The Jester Race, which is one of my favorite albums of all time, to near-perfect albums like Horrorcall, Clayman, and Colony, and also one of my other favorites, and in my opinion, the last great In Flames album, Reroute to Remain. I actually have discovered In Flames from the era when Come Clarity came out, seeing the music videos from that era of Take This Life to the title track, and then loving more of the earlier stuff, tracks like Trigger to I actually like A Quiet Place and Touch of Red from Soundtrack to Your Escape. But when it comes into the 90s period of In Flames, that was the band at their absolute peak with memorable, addictive, and phenomenal writings, especially into the sound of the genre on melodic death metal. But unfortunately, after the release of Reroute to Remain, I actually didn't come back to this band throughout, I say, close to 10 years, because the last actual time that I gave In Flames a chance of listening to a new album, it was through the record of Siren Charms, which I really did not like at all, and it was to me the worst album of 2014, and yet alone, after Siren Charms, I had stepped away from the band, yet alone I didn't even bother listening to Battles and I The Mask. So, for me, personally, it was a very difficult relationship that I was going through at the time after when I had listened to Siren Charms. When In Flames released, surprisingly, this new single back in June of last year called State of Slow Decay, I decided to check it out, and I was monumentally impressed. And now, since the new album is here, completely released, 12 tracks, what do I think of this album? I think this album is actually very good. But for me, as well as that I, like I said, used to love a lot of the early In Flames, Foregone is at some points like a massive return to form, because it has definitely been such a reflection of what I used to love from In Flames, but with Foregone making its new appearance and addition into this discography, I was pretty much looking forward to talk about this album in this review. So this is the first time that I have actually done a full review to this point on any In Flames album. First track on the album, The Beginning of All Things That Will End, just a very brief 2-minute piece, acoustic sounds with a major feel to open the sound with faint sounding double bass in a mid-tempo and accompanying violins in the background to pop into this brief set piece of the instrumental, and then boosts right in to State of Slow Decay. This is a banger with aggressive beats, Very cool styles with a return back to the heavier grunts of distorted guitars and thrashy drums which explode all the way through. Amazing ability on inventive riffs, on the verse sections and the brutality, while Anders' vocals sounded brilliant. This is Anders at maybe one of his absolute best vocals across a whole new album from this band. So much non-stop power from tight grooves and chemistry. It has built a complete nostalgic feel from what they used to make. A wonderful twin guitar harmony soloing as well later on into the track. Very good chorus on harmonic vocals and multi-tracking at the right spot. Big opening sound with the band to start the album after the opening song before this one. Meet Your Maker. Vicious guitar play, trickery, double bass pedaling awesomeness. The effective brooding sound of the whole group works as greatly, and it has become a very memorable flow. Creative delivery onto the chorus and later structure parts which stands right out because it is very catchy at the same time. And what I love as much was the combination on the addictive riffs and great melody, one of the other highlights of this album. Bleeding Out. The band decides to change things into this different edge of rhythm and time signatures, but the band still did sound confident. The clean vocals were really good on a lot of this, and as well as the rest of this album. The later parts of the song do come into heavy moments that sounded cool, but the chorus, unfortunately, just did not strike out as much as the other ones. But don't get me wrong, it is a decent path of the instrumentation, while it just doesn't feel as perfect of a song like the ones previously. One of my least favourites on this album, but nonetheless, it is pretty average. Foregone Part 1. Blast beat introduction to annihilate the listener. And this has so much power to it. What a belter of a song this is. I do love the energetic and quick pace. The band was totally on fire, dominating with variety on guitar riffs. Again, wicked distorting vocal growls from Anders. This song had the audacity to have a presentation of the structure with blazing strengths on creative music, and this is one of the other favorites on here. This is like one of the other highlights as much as State of Slow Decay. Part 2, however, does feature a change into the opening guitar lines, slowing the tempo right down, but still manages to make a solid beat and arrangement in the mood and the very melodic side. The whole sound was packing in this whole expression type, included padded type effects during the clean vocals. The drums were terrific, and the bass does feature itself very small pieces into this whole mix, but positively. And the vocals do come in from the chorus, which was something quite unexpected, alongside with the acoustic guitars. Not much of a stellar song like Part 1, but I do dig this one quite a lot still than Bleeding Out. Pure Light of Mind continues that gentle formula into this very melodic side, but it still makes this positive and confident side into these harmonic lines. Again, like the previous track, this switches into this poppy-ish feel involving higher falsetto vocals. The band did sound pretty sweet on here. It's not something that I love as much as the intensity from what I've heard so far on the record, but needless to say though, this is pretty diverse and it's quite progressive when you think about it, because when it comes into the softer side of In Flames from previous records, they were just not there. They were really predictable, sappy, and as uninteresting. But when it comes into this whole returning process on this album, I think that they were making something to improve, and I do give them a lot of respect for that. That's just personally my own opinion on that whole side of In Flames' changeable styles. But onto the whole consistency of Anders' melodic vocals, they sounded really nice. And what I think as well is that there's a lot of passion into this record, and there's a lot of that very noticeable listening approach that I was getting into when I was listening to this album. The Great Deceiver, returning back to their signature sound, this goes into another set of catchy, appreciative riffing, perfect simplicity as well, and the guitars do shine so much into this whole sound of the band. Wonderful pieces that completes that classic era In Flames, like their heyday. This is another one of my favorites on this album at the same time. The next song, In the Dark, the riff is pretty sludgy as the song begins, then pushes into more creative ideas and a bit of a complex rhythm section. And I like this one very much because it features Anders' vocals just as, like I said, expressive, even when they're double tracked, but this has a lot of the feels. The lead guitars sounded beautiful with a perfect transitioning. It just sounds big. These belted, precise flows were just phenomenal in this diversity, and the soloing turns with the musicianship is another excellent movement of this track. A dialogue in B-flat minor. The brutal alternate picking actions sounded stunning, and the band did work together to strike out with their dexterity and speed controls. Pretty solid, involving soaring out impressive clear vocals from the vocal range, but it's not one of the songs, again, that has this stellar, adoring feel, but it is so ambitious, and these key changes were neat ideas nonetheless, as well as that the key change part does happen on some of the previous tracks and later ones. Second to last track, penultimate track, Cynosure. The bass is where you can definitely hear it even more. It sounded fat and crisp into this prominent mix. It's really cool to make a separate appearance, to connect along with the vocals and the drums with their interaction, less aggression, and shifting places in the whole songwriting process. This is the cleanest song on this album vocally and as well as guitars, and it definitely makes this comfortable way, which surprised me because it sounded deeper, while not as darker in heaviness, but it is darker in a very different, separate way. The last track on the album, End of Transmission. This has grown back to the mid-tempo, kind of broody style with pummeling drums that was so well played, and as well as the rest of the band here. Music to this one sounded pretty solid, but it's not as explosive of a climax to finish off the album. It did feel pretty repetitive from the main portion into what the whole sound of the song was meant to be, but it was a neat one. But in terms of the whole record, I see that the first half to some of the later tracks I really enjoyed, that is where In Flames were really pushing themselves back up their feet. Overall, Foregone by In Flames is a really, really enjoyable album from the start to the finish. Chris Broderick, what a great new addition to the sound of In Flames, and the rest of the band, from Chris to Anders, Bjorn and Tanner, they all worked so effectively. Great musicians all around, and Howard's production was really, really good. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments down below. This album for me was a really good listening experience, but despite the flaws and these drawbacks, In Flames have personally made one of these fewer really, really good albums that made me very reflective and nostalgic. Like I said in my review earlier on, do you think this is one of your favorite In Flames albums? And even more so, do you think this is one of their best? I wouldn't go that far as one of the strongest albums, but this has been a really good album from In Flames that I actually enjoyed. Not loved all of it, but enjoyed so much since Reroute to Remain. I'm going to give Foregone by In Flames an 8 out of 10. Despite the negatives, there will be some moments when I would be coming back to these tracks that I like so much. There's no rhyme or reason that I would definitely come back to this album and like it for what it is. So much love and respect to In Flames themselves for making an album that just takes me back into what I used to love for the most part. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.